Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Nick. Hey, Nick, how's it going today?
Very good. Very good. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're joining me. Just spoiler alert to our listeners out there. This is your first podcast, but I think you're going to do okay. I think so. And I brought you on today because you have a background in cyber litigation, and you're well versed in cyber breaches and coverages for cyber claims. So I thought you'd be a perfect match for our guest today, which is Milan Radosevic, who is from Coalition, and he handles cyber claims. And when I had mentioned to you that I had spoken to him and I learned that you did cyber, I was like, hey, you want to join me? And I got an enthusiastic yes. So I appreciate that.
Coalition's a great company, and really we'll enjoy talking with them.
Yeah, and look, cyber claims are huge, and they're almost like a silent insurance attack. So and I think I'm going to learn the most here today. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. So with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good morning, Milan. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. How are you today?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you, and I brought on Nick today because we were here to talk about cyber claims, and Nick is our cyber liability expert at Cruiser Mitchell. So he can really speak your language, I think. And and when I told him about it, he got all geeked out about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, can I come on?"
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about managed detection and response, MDR. All right.
It's the little things in life. I guess this is like a big thing in life. But before we dive into all things, cyber liability, I want to talk to you a little bit, Milan, about how you got where you are, because everyone, people are going to be so tired of hearing me say this. So I apologize to everyone listening to this podcast, but I love to hear everyone's background story. And I'm going to ask every single guest who comes on about their background story because I find it interesting. So sorry, but you're all going to have to listen to it too. But I find it so interesting because everyone has just a different path and how they got where they are. And very few got into claims, and very few even got into being an attorney because they originally thought that's what they wanted to do. So, what's your story? What was your path?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So basically, interesting story. Like, I'm originally from Eastern Europe, from Belgrade, Serbia. So I moved to United States 23 years ago, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So when I first came here, I couldn't even speak English. So I had no idea what I was about to do and how I'm going to go through this, journey. But yeah, at some point in my life, after I settled and everything here in Atlanta, I actually went to school for risk management and insurance. After that, I landed the first job in an insurance, kind of like a big insurance carrier, one of the major carriers. And I didn't handle cyber claims back then. So I just ended up in a claims world. Like, that was after my college, that was the job that they offered to me. And I was like, yeah, I'll take anything. So, so I landed into claims, and it was like commercial auto and general liability claims. So comparing to what I do now, I kind of think like it's super boring comparing to cyber claims world. So yeah, I did work for that insurance carrier for a few years, and at some point I started looking for other opportunities. I was able to get a job and another insurance carrier where basically they gave me a chance. I didn't have experience in handling cyber claims, but I had a experience handling claims in general. So they were like, hey, there is nobody. That was like back in 2016. Back then, it was like not too many like people doing cyber claims. It was like still early stages. So they were like, it's really hard to find anybody with experience. So we understand you don't have experience. We'll train you. So that's how I ended up in a cyber claim. So I worked for that company for like 3 years. And yeah, I moved after that, like through some other kind of insurance carriers handling the cyber claim.
So I just want to back up a little bit, and it has nothing to do with claims. But you said that you came over from Serbia and you ended up in Atlanta, Georgia. How did, in fact, did you head, like, how was Atlanta, Georgia where you decided to go? Like, did you have friends or family there? Like, I just find it interesting. I'm very
that's where his finger lands.
yeah, like what?
Yeah, like basically, I had no plan, no idea what I'm doing. I would never do it again. Like when I moved, when I was like moving to this country, like I said, I was 26 years old. I had $200 in my pocket, and I didn't speak English. So, and I was like, yes, I'm going to US, and I'm gonna make it over there. So, but it did work out. So yeah. And the way I picked up Atlanta, Georgia, it was like typical stories for immigrants, like how I had a friend of mine from my home city, Belgrade, Serbia, living here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And that was the only reason. I was like, hey, at least I know one person over there. That person offered to help me kind of like settle and show me a way around. So I was like, okay, I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia. I had no idea difference between South, North, West Coast, East Coast. To me, it was like all the same. So yeah, that's how I ended in
Kind of the American dream, right?
right, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. What was your education level when you came over, Milan? I know you said, did you go to college? So secondary school over here?
I did finish a business school here, but back home I had the mechanical engineering associate degree. So I made complete change in my like in my life and the career. I made a complete change. Like yeah, so I'm coming from mechanical engineering background, and yeah, like I didn't have a lot of experience working in that field, but I did work back home in a mechanical engineering field.
Now, did like moving from Serbia to Atlanta though? Like, what was the like shock like for you? Because it's totally different. Like,
it is like completely different, and it's funny. I was just like at the conference a week ago, and I was talking to somebody kind of like similar questions. We had this conversation. So yeah, it was a big shock. Like my first shock was, like I said, I couldn't speak English when I came here, but I had idea like from the movies and from music and stuff like that. I could understand basic conversation. I could not speak English. Anyway, I thought like I have pretty good idea about English language. So I'm landing to Atlanta, Georgia, and I go and first person I talk to is a TSA agent. It's like a Southern gentleman. So he started asking questions, and I turn around. I'm like, this guy is not speaking English. Like he had a thick Southern accent. So to me, it was like I don't know if this is English or something else. Like yeah, so it was a big cultural shock, and yeah, everything was bigger. One of the things that kind of like caught my attention early, like Atlanta is like no, it's a big city, but when I came here like 23 years ago, it was like much smaller. It was more like a suburb type of living style. And to me, it was like everybody's in the cars comparing to Europe. Like Europe, you got the busy streets, kind of like New York City vibe. But over here was different. It was a southern city. So I'm like, everybody's in the cars. I don't see people around. And like in the beginning it was like really big shock for me. Like
interesting.
I didn't like that I cannot use public transportation. I have to use my car to go anywhere, like even for simple grocery kind of like trip to purchase something simple, I was like, it takes too much time. I always have to be in a car. Like I like to be like, like hanging out with the people, walking on the streets, using public transportation. So that
And
was
like
the
Chicago. Have you ever been to Chicago?
I like Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago is like reminding me of that,
Right.
European cities. So
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of public transportation here. A lot of I walked from Union Station this morning, so a lot of walking, a lot of shared routes. So there is a lot of interaction in Chicago.
mhm.
Yeah, were you like at that time to be like, wait, why did I choose this place? And no knock against Atlanta at all. I'm just like, sounds like it was just it was so different. And you probably were like, man, maybe I should have picked somewhere I could like walk around a little bit more.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm pretty sure a lot of immigrants going through the same phase, like which is normal. It's like in the beginning, it's a big shock. Then you start questioning yourself. Did I make the right decision? And, kind of like I had a couple of situations where I was like thinking like, you know what, maybe I'll just go back to Europe, but I didn't. So it was, yeah. I mean, and over time I got used to it. So now I feel this is my home. Like when I go visit my family in Europe, I spend time over there. I love it, but after a while, I'm like, I'm missing, Atlanta.
Yeah.
I want to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny what you mentioned about like coming over though, not knowing the language and knowing some from movies. Because a good friend of mine moved over here in her like 20s, didn't know any. She moved over from Siberia and pretty much learned English from like watching soap operas, like how you like those stories that you hear about. Like she's like, yeah, no, I did that. I learned at the beginning from watching television.
Yeah, that's how we, like, yeah, in Eastern European countries, yeah, you watch American movies and listen music. That's how you kind of pick up the basics. Then when I first moved here, my first job was in a hotel. I was
uh,
doing valet and stuff. So I was close to a lot of people, So I did use that for me to kind of like practice and start speaking. And, it was kind of like embarrassing in a lot of situations, but I was like, you know what? I have to communicate with the people. So I would just be honest, like, hey, look, I came 2 months ago. My English is not good, but let's have a conversation.
Did you find that people were willing, when you're honest like that, people were willing then to, oh, okay, and then like and be very helpful to you?
Yeah, exactly. That's my experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
when you put it that way, and when you're honest, like, hey, look, I know I'm making grammar mistakes. I'm still doing it. You're probably hearing. But I was like, I know like I'm not good in this, but help me. And I
yeah.
was always like, hey, how do you say this? What I should say and stuff like that. So yeah, people in general, when you approach it like that, they were like super helpful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you came over though, and you had a background in mechanical engineering. Why was that not like a career? Like why didn't you explore that career path?
Yeah, so basically when I came here, yeah, that was the natural kind of like idea just to continue what I was doing. Anyway, I had, like I said in the beginning, like when I moved to United States, I had idea that I might not stay here and that I will go back. Back home in my country, like mechanical engineering field was not in the best kind of like position for for jobs and stuff like that. The jobs were not paying much. There were not enough jobs, like because my country, the country I come from, we went through a lot of trouble, like in 90s.
Hmm.
There was like a civil war. The whole industry was destroyed. No jobs. That's one of the reasons I came over here, because there was kind of like
Yeah.
for younger people back then in those days, there was like no future over there, like in terms of career and stuff like that, to be financially stable and so on. So pretty much my generation was like everybody was looking for a way to get out of there.
Yeah.
So I had idea to go back to Serbia potentially at some point, and I'm like, I don't want to be a mechanical engineer over there, like making $200 a month. Like, let me go to business school, because back, I was thinking like business school will give me education for whatever I decide. If I stay here, I'll be good. If I go back, I'll be good too.
Mhm.
So that was the kind of like my reasoning for changing that course.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting though too. And it just and hearing what you like the environment that you came from and like how that like pushed you to move it, but also like when I hear mechanical engineering, like that's like like that's a lot. It's not like any silly business. Like it's a lot of school technical like
Right. It is, yeah. And it's not, I sometimes, like I use those skills, like in kind of like I work with a lot of claims people which have legal background, a lot of attorneys, and typically they're impressed with my math skills. Like when we have some type of calculation or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's this is how you do it, and they're like, oh my god, you're a god, like
you're a
Yeah.
genius.
right.
I always say I went to law school because I can't do math. I mean, that's my, that's kind of a common joke. So do you find, I mean, math's one thing, but how much do you find that your background helps you now in what you're doing as a claims person? Engineering background, here's my thought. Engineering background, you're learning a lot about how things work, looking at the details of something, figuring out if you push something here, what's going to happen over here, kind of a cause and effect thing. Do you find that helps you with, for example, understanding how a policy works, understanding how coverage or a claim might flow through a policy?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that background helps me. And I find a lot of kind of like areas where, yeah, coming from the mechanical engineering background, especially handling cyber claims, like
Right.
I like to I was just like before this, podcast, I was on a call with I'm handling kind of like a complex ransomware claim that came in this morning. The whole company is like crippled, so the production stops, everything stops. It helped me to understand, for example, business interruption
Right.
portion of the claim. Like specifically, these people that I talked to this morning, they have like 20 locations. They have retail, they have production, so everything stopped because of cybersecurity incident. So yeah, it does help me a lot, like to understand potential business interruption implications, to understand what needs to be done in terms of like system restoration. Do we need to purchase new equipment, or can we recover from backups and just all those things? Like it does help me. Like
That that
yeah,
is very interesting. I hadn't thought about that from a business interruption standpoint. Right, having that technical background that you have helps you better to understand when an insured's telling you, "Hey, we can't operate right now because X, Y, and Z are down." That's interesting. Well, some of the biggest business interruption claims I've handled involve manufacturing facilities. I'm thinking of one right now that was out in Nebraska, exact same thing. Systems got hit, the equipment stopped working, production stops, they're not meeting contractual requirements with third parties. Yeah, that's to understand that on the ground, because it's not just numbers too. You hire forensic accountants to deal with that,
right,
but
right.
really understanding and talking with the insured and making them feel comfortable that they're being heard because you have that background. That's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like I can kind of like have that conversation with them,
Right.
understand what
Mhm.
they are going through, and they appreciate that. It's stressful situation for them, but they appreciate, like I understand actually the company's down, like, yeah, and they cannot operate. So their main concern is like how we get up and running, like how we distribute the products, how we, like follow up with all orders that we already have and stuff like that. So
Right.
I'm pretty sure you went through those scenarios many
Oh,
times.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I have a math background, and I actually think that having that analytical background really helps. It helps it like I, and it is what people I think fail to understand a lot too about like math. Math isn't accounting. Like accounting is something totally different, and math is very analytical, logical thinking, working through like problem solving. and a step-by-step process. So it like, I mean, I remember even taking the LSATs, like that whole logic game section. To me, I was like, well, this is just a big fun math game. This is great.
You were by yourself on that.
I was.
That was all. That was all. I hated those logic games.
I buy books today and I do them. Like I enjoy.
Wow.
It's like my Sudoku. Like I love doing those types of like analytical games. My daughter loves it too. Like it's fun for me. So I hear they're getting rid of that part of the LSAT though. So.
Oh, really? No, that's part of the earn your stress, part of the gauntlet, right? That's awful. Absolutely awful.
I could do without reading comprehension. Like I'm totally sidetracking, but I like talk to my daughter about this too. And she's like, "Oh yeah, on those standardized tests, those reading passages." I was like, "Oh, I know they're the worst." I'm like, "But you just have to think you're going to learn something every single time you read one of those reading comprehension passages. Just you're learning about something new."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't follow up too much. Like I wish I have more time to kind of like do the same things you do. But yeah, like before when I was like back home in a college, I mean in a school for mechanical engineering and stuff like that. When I moved here, I remember like when I decided I want to go to business school, they had to do kind of like evaluation uh, to kind of like see on what level I am. I didn't prepare at all. And I know that like a lot of people here would like spend some time to prepare for those exams. And I didn't prepare at all. I went to the school. They were like, hey, we need to test you. You either do it like, I'm like, it was some type of like tight deadline. So basically they were like, you either do it today or you have to wait next semester or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'll just do it today. And I did it perfectly. Like it was.
One of the few. I'm like you, Milan. So for the LSAT, speaking of the LSAT in particular, it was like $1,000 or $1,500 for the course to train you, and specifically those logic games. There's an entire strategy of how to kind of map that out as you're going to help you with it. Well, I wouldn't spend the $1,000 or $1,500 at the time because I didn't want to take that course. And I'll just go in and wing. Well, I didn't get the best score that I think I could have gotten had I gone and done the strategy. Fast forward after law school for the bar exam, I turned over every stone you possibly could. Studied as hard as I could because I was like, I'm going to do this one time, never come back for the bar exam again. But yeah, initially I was the same way. Just kind of go in and give it your best shot and hope for the best, I guess.
I was doing all kind of like stuff when I was younger. I was like, you don't think that much. You don't put analysis into that. That's why I said I would not make decisions that I made before, like I would not do it today. But like for example, going to complete, like foreign country with no money, no plan, no nothing, like kind of like. But back in the days, I was that way. I was like, yeah, I'll do it today. I'll, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in hindsight we realize a little bit how much some things how much they impacted our life and how much the direction that where that could have gone. If I would have absolutely bombed the LSAT, maybe I never would have gone to law school. So like if I would have thought that going in, I sure would have paid the $1,000 or $1,500. But it worked out. In the end, it all worked out anyway. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to you and claims. So how you talked about how you started at a carrier and you're doing like motor vehicle type claims, but how did you eventually segue into cyber?
So basically at that point I was like, claims, like, and especially like if you're working, like if you're in an entry level claims position, like it's a lot of volume. Like it was a lot of claims, a lot of kind of like pressure with the workload. So at some point I start looking for kind of like, let's see what else I can do. Like, can I go to underwriting or can I do something else? So basically I start looking for opportunities out there. And since I had the experience in the claims, this carrier was willing to kind of like interview me for for the cyber position. So basically, at that point I didn't know that, like, I didn't know anything about the cyber and privacy claims. So, but yeah, I mean, it was like good conversation. They felt like I would be a good fit and I would learn quickly. That was my selling point. I was like, look, like, I went from mechanical engineering to business school and I'm learning fast. Like, give me a chance, I'll show you I can do the job. So they were like, yeah, that sounds good. And that's how I started. Like, so I started with a kind of like entry level cybersecurity claims handling position.
Yeah, and not even just mechanical engineering in business school, in Serbia, and now you're here in the I mean, you definitely, I would think they had a good confidence level that this is somebody who can adapt, learn things, and has a willingness to do so, obviously, with your track record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about cyber claims in general. And this is where Nick gets to geek out a little bit, and you can geek out a little bit, and I can just facilitate. So, like when I think of cyber claims, like I think of things like the issue that happened at Sony, a few years ago, with pulling out. I remember when they got all the information, they got the text messages or the emails from all the celebrities. Like that's what I think about. So but that may or may not be the reality. So like what kind of claims are you seeing on the daily, or I guess not daily because they're larger and you might not get a new claim every day. The volume is less, but what are you really seeing right now?
So yeah, the majority of the claims that we are seeing, like, I put them in a like group. There is like three kind of like main type of incidents that we see. It's phishing emails, business email compromise. That's the like a lot of those claims. We see a lot of those. Then funds transfer fraud claims and ransomware. So those are three kind of categories that I see a lot. And yeah, and basically there is no like limitations like who they're attacking as far as the industry. So those bad actors, they can attack like Sony and get hold of the information that is kind of like interesting for the public, for like all the talks, like, yeah, celebrities and stuff like that. But in the real world, it's happening like to everybody. It's happening to law firms, it's happening to healthcare organizations, schools. So there is no kind of like limitations. So yeah, like those that you mentioned, they typically hit the headlines and the news, but it's happening everywhere, like on a daily basis.
Yeah, and Megan, it's happening every day to us, right? I mean, we all get those emails. I know I've seen notices as recent as yesterday that we're getting those phishing emails like Milan is talking about, where they're trying to pose as something that they're not, and they're trying to get you to click on a link, or the recent trends are QR codes, trying to get you to scan that. They'll pose as HR people. It was dangerous recently here in our office in Chicago. Milan, we just opened up the Chicago office. My group came over and joined Cruiser Mitchell in January and opened Chicago. And right away, we're getting those phishing emails the minute we pop up on the webpage. That's what they're watching. And they're posing as HR people. And so I was really concerned and made sure everyone in our office knew, if you get an email, it's saying it's a QR code, it's HR, that seems legitimate right now because we were opening a new office. They need your information. Don't scan it. Don't click on it. Check with us first. We'll reach out to headquarters, and our headquarters is down in Georgia as well. But so we're seeing that there's no target that's too small. They're sending it everywhere. And then Milan, I'm sure what you're handling too with those is like the social engineering or fraudulent instruction claims. Those are just so rampant, and I mean, we see those constantly.
Right. So yeah, definitely. That's, first of all, I'm so paranoid like about the phishing email. So yeah, like you said, Nick, we are all receiving those emails. So there is no like protection from that. You will receive the phishing email. So you just have to kind of like be careful. So I'm
It's
super
not the
paranoid.
Prince of Nigeria, right? It's not
Yeah,
the Prince of
yeah,
Nigeria.
it's not like that anymore. They're sophisticated
Right.
now, so it's so easy to fall for it. Like,
Yep.
when you're busy, something happening, something going on. Like, I just heard somebody, like, it was a test in our company, but it was a test basically just to see if the employees will fall
Yeah.
for the phishing email.
Mhm.
And it was something like the boss sent the email to, so the employee requested uh, some expense to be approved, travel expense or whatever. So the boss responds like, hey, it's denied. If you want to see the reason, click here. So the person click. And
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like, hey, you got caught, like you clicked on a phishing link, kind of
yeah.
like. So those are kind of like, yeah, very
And so
sophisticated. Like,
with that, was there okay, with that, so that was a real email. So was there a security breach where someone was in monitoring the boss's email?
no, this was just like kind of like
Trick.
exercise,
Yeah.
Oh, I
trick,
see. I
like
see.
to see real life scenario. But I'm pretty sure it's happening in real life.
But that
Right.
seems, I mean, that one, I think a lot of people would fall for. Like I've definitely seen similar ones on my end too. Like, oh, here's your payroll report, and I never click on it because it's not a PDF. And like, well, for a real payroll report, it would
Mhm.
probably be a document, and it's usually like a link to something. But it is, you know, it is believable. I'm like, oh well, yeah, maybe that's how I see my pay stub. I don't know. I could definitely. They're savvy. They're very very savvy,
Yeah.
and 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 we're attuned to it. And there's a lot of people who aren't, and they're gonna click on the link. Like my mom would definitely click on the link. She
Right.
probably has a
And
hundred
And
times.
it's happening.
I are
It's
in this
happening.
every day, and I see those emails, and it gives me, if I even pause, have a hesitation for just a second, I think, geez, people who aren't paying attention to this and doing this every day and know maybe what the recent trends are, they're probably clicking on that, right? And
Right.
then you don't know how far down the line they're going. Usually you have to give a little more information or scan something. But and then what I've seen a lot lately, I wonder if you've seen this, Milan, is title agents are such a huge target. People who handle like commercial closings, real estate transactions,
Yeah.
and the threat actors are very, very smart in how they deal with them. They will infiltrate, they'll breach the system, and they don't just start acting right away. They'll monitor emails for a while. They will track specific transactions. They'll watch until you get to the very end and you're starting to exchange information for the wire transfer of funds. And they'll either intercept the legitimate instruction, or they'll say, well, here's an updated instruction or something like that. And if the title agent doesn't use a two-factor authentication or multi-factor, meaning that they reach out to the sender to verify the information, those funds get diverted. So, I mean, I've seen a $10 million commercial closing where the funds get diverted to the threat actor's account.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, Nick, and that's what I was about to kind of mention. Yeah, like the threat actors, their goal is not just for you to click on a phishing email or provide credentials. Their goal is to monetize their breach. So they're looking for ways to do it. One of the easiest way and the most attractive way for them is funds transfer fraud schemes or
Mm.
social engineering, what Nick just explained. So basically, once they have access to that email account, like typically they target like CFO or CEO or somebody like that who handles or accounts payable department or somebody like that. So when they get access to that, they start monitoring that communication. They learn
Mhm.
who is doing what the victim is about to pay, what invoices, who are the players in that communication. So they kind of take time to figure out how to execute. So at the right point, when there is a closing, like Nick said, like there is a closing date, today is a closing, they're like, hey, here is the updated the transaction information. Here is where you need to send the money, though. And they provide the fraudulent account. So that's typically how they execute that. And yeah, like it can be transactions in the millions. So
Absolutely. Is part of your coverage, Milan, do you require insureds either right within I've seen policies where right in the insuring agreement, it requires that you follow that you have procedures adopted and that you follow those for authenticating any monetary transfer, any wire transfer.
right.
Is that part of your policy, or do you require that of insureds now to have multi-factor authentication for wire transfers?
So yeah, some policies, it just depends. Some
Right.
policies they have that requirement, some policies don't. And that's like, I don't know how they decide that on the underwriting side.
Mhm.
It relates to the type of businesses we write to. So yeah, the banks, I believe that financial institutions that are doing the transactions on a daily basis and title companies, those on those policies we do require a secondary method of authentication. So basically the policy would require, hey, when you receive the change in any type of payment from your vendors, you have to authenticate it by
Yeah.
the secondary method, which is picking up the phone. Like if you receive instructions via email, you cannot just respond by email like, hey, is this legit? Because the bad actor will respond, yes,
Right.
it is, of course, go ahead,
Right.
do it.
Right.
So you have to pick up the phone and use secondary method of
And not just pick up the phone too, right? Call a known phone number, something that's already on file.
right.
Don't look at the phone number that the threat actor put in the email, which by the way, I've had a claim before where the threat actor left a phone number on there and our insured called, they answered and said, yep, that's the right number. If you're authenticating with them,
Right,
they're just
yeah,
gonna
they
read
would
the
call.
number back.
Or if they provide the invoice or something like that, the invoice
Right.
manipulation scenarios, like, or stuff like that, they like Nick said, they would provide the instructions where to send the money, and they would say, hey, if you got any questions, here is the number you need to call. And you call that number, they pick it up, the bad actors pick it up and say, yeah, go ahead, do it. Like
Right.
just
Right.
send the money.
But if you're in the midst of this thing, like you're gonna call that number, right? Like unless you are suspecting of something, and the way like these emails and everything is like put in front of you, it looks authentic.
Right.
So I think it's real challenging for someone to actually know what's happening because it seems all authentic, right? Like,
Right.
And that's a great point, Megan. And I think that's in Milan's company Coalition does a great job on proactive measures for insureds. People don't realize with cyber coverage, the value you get in getting educated by your carrier. Hopefully, they're doing things ahead of time to tell you what the schemes are, to look at the systems that you have up, to your policies and procedures in place. Having those ahead of time is one. I mean, it obviously helps them because they're not going to have as many claims, hopefully. But two, I mean, they're helping their insured because when these things happen and you have a system breach, like Milan was talking about the manufacturing facility that goes down, that's a lot bigger deal than just the claim you're going to have with your insurance company. If you're unable to fulfill contracts, it may ruin relationships forever. It could bankrupt your company, and not everything may be covered, or you're not going to have limits that are going to cover everything that puts you out of business. So Milan, I wonder if you can comment at all on kind of, I think I mentioned it earlier, but the managed detection and response, or in the industry we call it MDR, that Coalition offers to insureds and kind of helps them prepare and educates them for these types of things.
Yeah, so Coalition and some other insurtech companies, I'm pretty sure, Nick, you're familiar with what insurtech,
Yep.
but that's kind of a new trend in the insurance world for people who are not like closely into this field. Like, so the insurtech companies start popping up lately in last, let's say, 10 years or so, which are kind of like hybrid companies of insurance and tech companies. So company I work for, Coalition, they're like a insurtech company. They like to think about themselves more as a tech company. So they're providing cybersecurity services to clients. And basically our goal is to prevent the incident. So we are helping clients to avoid altogether being in a situation to have a claim. So one of the kind of like things that we are doing differently than traditional carriers, basically we would scan the client's network for vulnerabilities. Basically, we would do same what the bad actors are doing, scanning for vulnerabilities. If we detect vulnerability, we would notice that client saying like, hey, look, you got a backdoor open here, or you have RDP port open. You need to close it. If you don't close it, well, like sometimes in an extreme kind of like situations, we can be like, hey, look, we're gonna condition your coverage. If you don't close this, then like that there might be issue, like if you got a claim after that. So
Yeah.
kind of forcing them to keep the system secure and in a good kind of like security state. So that's what we are doing. We also, on a proactive basis, like we communicate with the clients. It's not like we just react. When something bad happened, we just react. We kind of like on a daily basis communicating with them about vulnerabilities, about, they can log in into the platform, see any red flags, resolve those red flags and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Right, right. And by now, I mean, this is like if your auto carrier came out and checked your car out for you and made sure everything was safe and that the car seats were in the right way and everything else. So, I mean, there is so much more that you get with cyber insurance, and really every business should have some form of cyber insurance at this point because we're all working on computers. We all rely on them so much.
I mean, even the smallest like businesses, you're still connected, to things online, and you still connected to banks and your money and your company's money, and like but it's funny, like my family has a small restaurant in Connecticut. And if I were to go to my brother and be like, how's our cyber coverage? My brother would be like, Megan, we don't even take credit cards. But we are on DoorDash now. So I'm like, well, you might want it now.
I actually have seen a small restaurant claim, though, relating to a cyber policy because they used a managed service provider for credit card transactions. And the managed service provider had a breach, couldn't process the transactions. Or I think I had one too that was a social engineering one where it said, for our transactions that you're processing, forward the money over to this account now. So I mean, yeah, it touches everything. But yeah, I guess if they're all cash, they're one of the few still immune, I guess.
Yeah, but I see claims with restaurants involved. So yeah, definitely they got hit. Like funds transfer fraud, like they can pay instead of paying a vendor, like they are
Yeah.
paying the fraudulent account and stuff like that. Yeah, email compromises and point of sale devices and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with funds transfer fraud, what Milan is talking about, so they will direct you, like you owe money to company X for the widgets. The threat actor will direct you to pay them as opposed to company X, saying maybe their wire information has changed or something like that. And what often happens in this situation is you pay the money, it's gone, the threat actor takes it, you turn to your carrier to provide for the loss. But then in the meantime, you also get company X who's saying, hey, we don't care what happened, we still didn't receive the money. Right. And they've got their own obligations, and there's kind of a domino effect of really damages that start happening. So I would say, and I'm sure Milan will agree with this because he was talking about something that just came in this morning. These claims in cyber are so time sensitive, whether it's a business is down or someone can't fulfill contractual obligations, or payment wasn't made and now they're going to cut off services to the insured, something like that. It's always so time sensitive.
Yeah.
To respond to the insured and help them with whatever they're dealing with.
But here's with the time sensitive nature, though, and this is where I'm naive, because can it be going on for a while before you realize it? Right? Like there could your network could be infiltrated like weeks before you have any idea.
Yeah, and typically that's a typical scenario. Like even on our ransomware claims, the threat actor, once they got access to the system, they move laterally through the system. They look what they can steal. Where is the sensitive data? Sometimes it takes weeks for them to like basically execute the ransomware. Basically, when the client or the victim realize there is a ransomware, that's like the final stage. Basically, at that point, the threat actor, you can imagine like, hey, like they break into the house, they search the house, they steal the stuff. On the way out, they burn the house, like to kind of like, like hide the evidence and just to leave. So at that point, the damage is done. That's when you see the ransom note, basically saying like, hey, look, your network was compromised. Please contact us to kind of negotiate.
Yeah, I like that analogy, right? Because once you see the smoke, to go to Milan's analogy, once you see the smoke, it's already done. They've been in, they've already sat on your couch, they already ate your sandwich, they've already taken your data. They want you, once you know, the successful threat actors, once you know, they want you to know. Usually, that's the situation.
All I see in my head is Ocean's 11.
Right.
the fake vaults, the money.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I'm picturing in my mind.
Well, now with deep fakes too, I don't know, Milan, if you've had any deep fakes yet in your claims, but
what's that?
But that's scary.
These things all have really juicy terms. So what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see any claims with the deep fakes, but yeah, that's kind of like a hot topic right now. Yeah,
it's in the media right now. So deep fakes are where they're AI generated. So for example, I believe there was a recent one where an individual, I think he was in Tokyo or something, he thought he was on a call, like a Zoom call or something like that, with his boss, and sat there, was on a half an hour call talking with his boss, and during that call, what he thought was his boss told him to transfer $25 million. And he thought, okay, well, then once the call is done, all right, boss told me to do this. So he goes and wire transfers 25. Well, it was, the entire thing was fake. It was a deep fake. It was AI generated image of his boss. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, if my understanding is correct, deep fakes to you or I would appear to be the same thing. You would think you're talking to me right now, but only counter AI can detect a deep fake.
So what do you do? Like that, I'm having a hard time like imagining how that works. I mean, AI is amazing how it works and how it spits out, if you go into ChatGPT, what it spits out with very little information. But the video part is what gets me in having the conversation. But I guess it works the same way. But I'm just thinking about the video movement and like generating. Yeah.
So the technology, I don't know, but yes, and what this, part of the concern going forward is just think of it like in a criminal context. Mm-hmm. What happens to reasonable doubt at this point? You might think you have something on video, someone's caught red-handed, right? But what happens to reasonable doubt now? I'm sure there will be experts and they can, through technological means, determine if something was real or if it was fake. But boy, I mean, I know that some companies were giving loans based upon recorded calls. Well, what if somebody says, if they default on the loan, they say, I never took the loan, that was a deep fake. I mean, what if that's their defense now? Yeah. So I don't know. I think what it's going to happen, and I wonder Milan's thought, but it's going to change the way that we do business. You don't ever a wire transfer. mean, there's already two-factor authentication, but maybe we say, no, you can't do it through, don't ever take an instruction through any technological means, whether a phone call, an email, or over a Zoom call. Only in person. Only certain people have certain levels of authority to make a wire transfer. It's just going to be it's a lot of safeguards, and it's going to change the way we do business.
It's almost like in that scenario, it's almost like a return to what it used to be, and like like physically having to walk into a bank. That like it's like changing the tides. Like we move so much in this digital arena that your bank branches are closing down. Like, and now it seems like maybe though it's going to take a few steps back, that the physical presence is going to be, necessary.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, I mean, in the cyber world, this is new. Deepfakes are new. So, I mean, in the cyber insurance, like the threat actors start using it. So, like Nick said, like we will have to adapt. Like we went through these phases, like with ransomware, with funds transfer fraud, like in the early stages. So we learned the lessons and we try to adapt. But from my perspective, like you said, Meghan, like typically the solutions are going back to the basics, like like those are like the solutions or preventions are not like, I mean, you can do so much with the technical kind of like things and the preventions, but it goes back to the kind of like basics, like pick up the phone, talk to the real person. Okay, so now we got deep fakes, that's kind of problematic. I think we're gonna go back, like you said, like, hey, you need to see the person, like physically see the person and talk to the person, or stuff like that. Like,
It is interesting, though.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that's been in the back of my mind, and I don't know if you guys would even have the answer to this, but where are these threat actors located? Like, I mean, is it like or do we even know? Like, I imagine them like in this like dark room in the basement, like with 18 screens around them, and it's like just one individual. Like, that's what I'm picturing in my mind. But like, what do we know about it? Do we know anything about it? And are we able to even track it really?
I mean, there is a law enforcement always trying to kind of like track them down and see if they can stop their operation. So I'm pretty sure that Nick is aware there is a big kind of like big news, like good news for us, like the biggest threat actor group out there, Lockbit, is actually it's down. So the kind of like collaborative law enforcement action between UK, FBI, Interpol in Europe, so they were able to take this group down, and that's kind of like just happened last week. So that's big news. But typically it's hard to track them. And it's hard for our law enforcement to kind of like do anything about it, because in a lot of cases, these groups are protected by the state. So in a lot of cases, they're sitting like somewhere in Eastern Europe, in Russia specifically. Like, so a lot of them are Russians and they're protected by their state. So, even if we got any information, any leads, they're not going to arrest them over there. So
right. And I
ahead.
think from forensics, because what you'll do in the typical scenario is there will be a suspected breach, and then the carrier, through usually approved vendors, almost always approved vendors, they'll get like forensics to come in. A company will come in and look to see, was there a breach? Was there any exfiltration of data? That sort of thing. We almost don't even ask anymore. I mean, it's not always relevant from my perspective, but the carriers do want to know, maybe can we identify which group it is, or that sort of thing. A lot of times, the best information you can get is just really what country did it come from. That's it. So good luck catching them, stopping them. As far as the groups, you had given, what people envision is some guy down right in a hooded sweatshirt down in a dark basement with a bunch of screens around him. It's not like that anymore. These are professional organizations with an office setting, with a large staff, that come in and work regular days, and it's big business now. So times have changed, and these groups are much more professional, and their tactics are much harder to detect than what we're used to seeing in the past.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah, the great point. Like, people typically imagine, like Nick said, like, one guy in a garage, but those specifically ransomware threat actor groups, those are big organizations. They operate like a company, basically. They have HR department, they have customer service department, they have structure. And it's like, I don't know exactly how big the group is, but it's a big organization, so they're smart, they know what they're doing. So yeah, it's not easy to kind of like go against them. So it's always that, yeah, that game.
Right?
Well, and they're well funded because they're
Oh
stealing
yeah.
money.
They're stealing money, yeah.
What's really interesting too, is that these organizations, like Lockbit, they want some credibility. There is something tied to their name now. There is a reputation to uphold in the way that they do business. And an interesting part of this, that I've talked with insureds with before, when we get to a point where we negotiate ransom and we're going to pay a ransom, is that the most, I assume Milan's going to agree that this is like a common question you get, and I've never had a great answer. But the insured will say, well, what guarantee do I have if I pay this ransom, right? And their promise is really, okay, it's not going to go to the dark web. Here's the decryption key. You'll get your information back. We'll delete the files that we have. How can you trust them?
You can't.
Right. And that's what we say. We say, well, however, that being said, a lot of groups understand that if they don't come through with what they say they're going to do, we keep tabs on who we're dealing with too.
Yeah.
We're not gonna pay the next ransom. If you burn us, that the cash is done. Okay, we'll have to deal with the insured in some other way. But they understand that they have to gain some credibility there for the next time that they breach.
Yeah.
Right. So typically they keep the promise in terms of like, yeah, they provide the decryption key and stuff like that. We are learning right now, like with the Logbit and with other groups that we're taking down, that they kind of lie about deleting the data that they stole. They keep it. They provide evidence, kind of like they deleted the data, but it seems like they're not doing it though. So, but they promise they are not going to put it on a dark web and so on. So yeah, but to Nick's point, like they are serious about the reputation, and if they promise something, they typically try to do that, because if they don't, that would be their last kind of like deal. Like next time, if we deal with that group, we would not make a payment, because everybody in the industry will know, hey, Logbit, they received $2 million for the ransom. They didn't provide the decryption key. So from that point, everybody will be like, okay, what's the point of paying them?
Yeah.
So
Right.
they want to keep their business going too.
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
can
you
call
almost have
it business, like
yeah, right. And if you think of it that way, that's their business, and the product they're selling you is to give you an out, even though they're the one that created switching. So to Milan's hypothetical, they're the one that started the fire, and now they're selling to you the idea that they're going to put the fire out for you.
Yeah.
Now, if you can get past the idea that, why am I going to, you're the one that caused it, I'm not going to pay you anything. But if you make the business decision, the product they're selling you is that ability that you can trust them now, that they're going to put the fire out, they're going to give you back the data, not sell it on the dark web. So they are selling something, and that's the only way that they can really monetize it, if you can kind of believe them at that point.
Yeah. Well, I'll trust you now.
Yeah, we'll trust you now, even though you started the fire. Okay, yeah, you say you'll put it out.
And I have those conversations with the clients on a daily basis. Like, it depends. We always have discussion before we make decision to make the payment. Like our kind of position is like, we don't want to pay if we absolutely have to pay that.
Right.
then basically, that's the question. And I try to explain to the clients, like, hey, look, we are paying the promise from the criminals, so that's what we are paying. Like, the damage is already done, data was stolen.
Mhm.
Now we're just paying promise that they will not leak it on a dark web or share it further.
Right. Right, because you can test decrypt. So they'll give you a decryption key. Part of it is you're going to pay, and they'll give you like a test key, and then you can test it and get some data back, so that they can show you, if you pay us, we'll give you everything back. But here to test it, we'll prove to you we're the ones that did it, and we can give you that access back. And caring about their reputation to it. So it's interesting. A thing that's happened recently, the SEC came out with some recently some new rules. And there's a rule if you have what's deemed a material breach, material to that specific business. Within 4 days of discovering it and determining it's a material breach, you have to report it to the SEC. The threat actors now, they're breaching systems, and they care about this stuff. They want the publicity that they breached your system. If they don't see the report to the SEC, they have gone themselves and reported on companies. Hey, we breached them, and they didn't tell you about it, SEC. So it's kind of interesting. Like, they want it to be told on. They want everyone to know that they're doing it.
Right.
Well, I mean,
And that's the way they're putting pressure on the
Right.
clients
Yeah,
to
that's
make
the
the
other
payment. Like,
leverage point.
they are getting more and more aggressive. Like, basically, sometimes they reach out to the companies, to the victims' clients, and be like, hey, did they tell you? Same scenario. Like, did they tell you they had the breach? And
Right.
the clients would be like, no, we don't know about it. Then, it's all kind of like reputational harm in place and all that. Then they're just putting pressure on the victim to make the
Yeah.
payment.
It's like them going to the neighbor's door and saying, hey, did you see the fire over there?
Right, right,
You're hypothetical. No one has called you. You guys better call the fire department.
right.
well, I find this so fascinating. Just because it's like, it's so different from what I do on a daily basis, but like, obviously, like, Nick is like in his like
Yeah.
you're in like your happy sandbox right now.
Right. Like you said, you're geeking out. Yeah.
And I think I could like wind you up and let you two go forever, go forever on this. But it's also scary. It's scary how prevalent it is, and how seemingly easy it is, and how expensive it can be for a company. And again, it goes to the point that you need to get that policy. You need to get that coverage, because no business is immune to it.
Yeah, and with cyber too, what I have found in helping insureds, because I've worked everything from being the point of first contact, probably similar to what Milan does, working with the insureds, to I represent insurance companies, so I've also represented as coverage counsel, disputing coverage. But helping insureds in these situations has been some of the most rewarding work I've done at all as an attorney. Because it's a situation that they are not prepared for a lot of times, and you are truly helping them, and it's so time sensitive. It's such a big deal to them and their business. It's a rewarding experience to feel like you're really helping them through the coverage. And there's so many different coverages too. You've got first party coverages, you've got third party coverages. So I love what I do. Love doing cyber work. It's obvious. And I think it's a great job. I think Milan's job is very rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Like, it's super rewarding. Yeah. Like, I mean, sometimes, like I said, like in the beginning, when everything happens, like, typically the victim is in a panic mode. Is my business going down? How I'm going to go through this? But yeah, that's why they need to buy. Like, it's always good idea to have a cyber policy if you're running a business. Yeah. No matter what type of business you have.
Right.
Well, I love that advice to the consumers out there, and I think that's great advice. What I also want to hear, and this is usually my closing question for most of the guests, is, Milan, knowing where you started and where you are now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
What advice to my younger self? To kind of like I mean, I don't have any regrets, but I kind of like, yeah, I would ask myself to kind of like put a little bit more thoughts on like, life-changing decisions, kind of like.
Well,
So,
YOLO, YOLO.
At least
but
you moved to Atlanta and not like, I mean, up
yeah,
here, the winters up here.
yeah, I
You
like
landed in a
Atlanta
nice
weather.
spot.
I like Atlanta weather. Yeah, I enjoy Atlanta. So yeah, it's a great city. So yeah, I mean, like definitely, I'm not saying like I made mistake. I was just like I said before, like when I was younger, I just didn't think about, like, probably like any younger person, didn't think much about decisions, just doing it. Like, but yeah, sometimes it's good to kind of like step back and think about it a little
Yeah. Yeah.
bit.
It's true. But sometimes the best decisions are made when you just have that feeling, though, too. Like, like I got to take this leap of faith. But yes, so it's good
Right.
to think about things too. Well, Milan, thank you so much for coming on. I found this super, super fascinating, and I think everyone tuning in will as well. And it's just to me, it's like a whole new world. Like it's just crazy. I think it's like this dark universe. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your tips and just like what on the cutting edge of cyber. So thank you so much for joining me and us. And of course, for everyone listening, as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. I think you can find us at Claims Never Sleep podcast on YouTube. So thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.